Let me thank the Chancellor for providing me with an earlier sight of his statement. But I have to say to the Chancellor, his complacency today is astounding. We face, in every public service, a crisis on a scale we've never seen before. Hasn't he listened to the doctors, the nurses, the teachers, the police officers, the carers, and even his own councillors? They're telling him they can't wait for the next budget. They're telling him to act now. For 8 years they've been ignored by this government, and today they've been ignored again. The Chancellor has proclaimed today that there's light at the end of the tunnel. This shows just how cut off from the real world he is. Last year, growth in our economy was among the lowest in the G7, the slowest since 2012. The OBR have just predicted we will scrape along the bottom for future years. Wages are lower now in real terms than they were in 2010, and they're still falling. According to the Resolution Foundation, the changes to benefits due to come in next month will leave 11 million families worse off. And you know, as always, the harshest cuts fall on the disabled people. The gap in productivity between this country and the rest of the G7 is almost the widest for a generation. UK industry is 20 to 30% less productive than in other major economies. And why? Well, in part the reason is that investment by this government in real terms is nearly 18 billion below its 2010 level. And this is a government that cut R&D, research and development, funding by 1 billion in real terms. Business investment stagnated in the last quarter of 2017. And despite all the promises, the government continues to fail to address the regional imbalances in investment. London again will receive 5 times more transport investment than Yorkshire and Humberside and the North. This is a government on climate change. How dare they speak? This is a government that single-handedly destroyed the solar industry. 12,000 jobs lost as a result of subsidy cuts. The Chancellor talks about the fourth industrial revolution, but Britain has the lowest. The Chancellor talks about the fourth industrial revolution, but Britain has the lowest rate of industrial robot use in the OECD. The government has put 75 million into its artificial intelligence programme. That's less than a tenth of what the US is spending. The Chancellor has made great play this week. The Tory bully boys can shout all they want.
There will be a full opportunity for people to contribute, but the right honourable gentleman must be heard. John McDonnell.
Mr. Speaker, they can shout all they want, they can make their snide remarks. People out there know the crisis in our community. The Chancellor has made great play this week of reaching a turning point in reducing the deficit and the debt. It's a bit rich coming from a party that's put 700 billion on the national debt over the last 8 years. And it's worth remembering, this is a party that promised us that the deficit would be eliminated completely by 2015, 2016. And bizarrely, his predecessor, now ensconced in the Evening Standard, or is it BlackRock or the Washington Speakers Bureau, whatever number of jobs he now has, his predecessor has been tweeting about achieving 3 years late a deficit target that he actually abandoned himself. The reality is that the Chancellor and his predecessor have not tackled the deficit. What they've done is they've shifted it onto the public services his colleagues are responsible for. He's shifted it onto the Secretary of State for Health. and the shoulders of NHS managers and doctors and nurses throughout the country. NHS trusts will end this financial year £1 billion in deficit. Doctors and nurses are struggling, being asked to do more and more, while there's 100,000 NHS posts going unfilled. Does the Chancellor really believe the NHS can wait another 8 months for the life-saving funds it needs? How many people have to die waiting in an ambulance before he acts? He's mentioned the pay offers to the NHS staff we're expecting shortly. That was forced upon him by the Labour Party and trade unions campaign against the pay cap. But let me say this to him. Taking away a day's holiday from those dedicated staff is mean-spirited. And I ask him now, will he drop this miserly act? The Chancellor has also shifted the deficit onto the Secretary of State for Education and head teachers, with the first per capita cut in schools funding since the 1990s. And today, the government is even trying to deprive 1 million children of a decent school dinner. So I'm asking the Chancellor, and I'm asking every Conservative MP, if there's... Order. The House must calm down. There will be plenty of opportunity for questioning from members in all parts of the House. The right honourable gentleman must be heard. John McDonnell. So I'm appealing to Tory MPs today, if they're serious about ending austerity, to vote with us this afternoon to give those children the free school meal they're entitled to. The Chancellor has shifted the deficit onto the Home Secretary and Justice Secretary. Crime is rising, yet he's cut the number of police officers by 21,500, the number of firefighters by 8,500, and our prisons and probation service are in dangerous crisis. In shifting the deficit onto the shoulders of the Secretary of State for Communities and Local Government, in reality, he's shifted this burden onto local councillors. Yes, Labour, Lib Dem and Conservative councillors alike. So I raise again the stark reality of what this means for the most vulnerable children in our society. There's been a 40% cut in early intervention to support families. The result is the highest number of children taken into care since the 1980s. Children's charities, not us, children's charities are saying this: this crisis could turn into a catastrophe without further funding. And also last year, 400 women seeking refuge were turned away because there were no places available for them in refuges. And there are now nearly 5,000 of our fellow citizens sleeping rough on our streets, more than double than it was in 2010. And tragically, one of our homeless citizens died only feet away from the entrance to Parliament. He's mentioned additional housing funding. He mentioned London. The additional housing funding announced for London today is not a new announcement. This is money already announced. Any new funding is welcome, but it's simply not enough, and it represents a cut in London's budgets compared with the money Labour allocated in 2010. There are 1 million vulnerable older people who have no access to the social care they need. Conservative councils are going bust. Many will be forced to hike up council tax. Councils are running out of reserves, as the National Audit Office explained to us. So I ask the Chancellor, will he listen to Conservative council leaders, like his own in Surrey, who said, and I quote, "We're facing the most difficult financial crisis in our history. The government cannot stand idly by while Rome burns." And I ask him, how many more children have to come into care? How many more councils have to go bust? How many more have to run out of reserves before he wakes up to this crisis and acts? Today's statement could have been a genuine turning point, but it is depressingly, another missed opportunity. People know now that austerity was a political choice, not an economic necessity. The Conservatives chose to cut taxes for the super-rich, the corporations and the bankers, and it was paid for by the rest of us in society. They even cut the levy on bankers in last month's Finance Act. We were never all in this together, as they claimed, never. They cut investment at the very time when we should have been developing the skills and infrastructure needed to raise productivity and grasp, yes, the technological revolution with both hands. And when they had a responsibility to meet the challenge of Brexit, we have a Chancellor who this weekend admitted he hasn't even modelled the government's options. Today we have the indefensible spectacle of a Chancellor congratulating himself on marginally improved economic forecasts, while he refuses to lift a finger as councils go bust, the NHS and social care in crisis, school budgets are cut, homelessness has doubled and wages are falling. This isn't a government preparing our country for the future, it's a government setting us up to fail.